I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Russian Federation to deliver his statement. You have the floor, sir.
Chairman, we have carefully read this report of the Secretary-General, which contains an attempt to cover all aspects of the organization's activities, which, in one or other way, contribute to the bolstering of the rule of law, both nationally and internationally. We have before us a very variegated picture, a digest of assistance programs and UN peacekeeping mandates in the area of promoting justice, demobilization, reintegration and repatriation, security and justice for women and girls, and also measures to counter corruption and terrorism. What adds to this picture is the mention of matters of the abolition of the death penalty and countering cybercrime, matters of climate change in connection with ensuring peace and security. It is not entirely clear why these particular aspects should be reflected in this report. The superficial way of presenting these facts, predefined by the format of the document, means that one cannot get into the essence of the matters under discussion and assess the effectiveness of UN measures taken in this regard. And we cannot fail to notice that all these matters are discussed comprehensively and effectively in the examination of peacekeeping missions, country dossiers in the Committee on Peace Building, not to mention the special formats, the availability in the organization for the discussion of questions of corruption, terrorism, and cybercrime. Without doubt, all these matters deserve the most serious attention. However, we are not certain that the Sixth Committee is the appropriate forum for this. It would seem to us that the discussion of these matters in the Sixth Committee is really a classical demonstration of the duplication of effort. In any case, we consider it important to underline that that helping states on UN issues when it comes to constitution building or enhancing legislation should only be given on the basis of requests from corresponding states with the proper accounting of the national strategies and priorities of said countries. We consider that a comprehensive analysis and taking account of cultural, historical, legal, religious, and other particularities of the unique model of the rule of law intrinsic to each state must be part and parcel of UN efforts to bolster the rule of law at the national level. In the provision of technical assistance, the UN must recall that the choice of a model of state setup and governance and setting up a system of government administration is a domestic matter for states. This is inseparable from the principle of equality, sovereignty of states, and non-interference in domestic affairs. The Russian delegation champions the fact that the UN should focus on the matter of the rule of law, in particular at the international level. However, in this report before us, this whole section is essentially devoted to mechanisms of international justice, although Resolution 73-207 does not require this in any form. Serious attention is given to an organization which is marginal for the United Nations, the International Criminal Court. There's a particular reflection of giving it administrative, legal, material, technical, and other assistance. But no objective picture is given of its activities, which gives rise to justified criticism on the part of the international community. Nor do we understand why in the report, once again, there is a reflection of the illegitimate mechanism to investigate crimes in Syria and also a similar structure to investigate in Myanmar. We all know only too well how this mechanism was set up. This process went along with such brazen violations of international law and the UN Charter that talking about the judicial validity and admissibility of its hypothetical evidence is simply moot. The debates which took place in April in this regard in the General Assembly demonstrated only too clearly the varied approaches of states to this matter. Taking this into account, we insist that the Secretary-General and member states should refrain from any form of support for this. We support the activities of the ILC, UNCITRAL, and assistance programs in the area of teaching, study, dissemination, and a more broad recognition of international law, the International Court, and other dispute settlement mechanisms. But we should also note that the activities of these bodies are also the matter of separate discussion in other fora. In this connection, the question arises as to whether it makes sense to set out in this report decisions taken by these bodies and mechanisms. At the very least, one delegation is trying to use this discussion to proclaim its own partial and politicized view of the course of various legal and arbitration process, which is far from being a matter for discussion here and does not help a constructive dialogue. When it comes to the section on a global focal point, here the place and the role of this structure remains unclear to us. Clearly, states still need to define it in future. At the current point, this is just an internal UN administrative decision which provides for the joint placing together of personnel from different departments. Whether this decision will lead to added value is an open question. Chairman, we note this section of the report on the exchange of best practices when it comes to assisting compliance with international law. The work of the Secretariat in this regard deserves praise. In our view, a discussion of this matter could be pursued next year. It may be that a useful aspect of the examination of this could be consolidation of examination of various practices when it comes to the implementation of instruments on the conditions of hosting UN systems, so that states can exchange best practice in this regard. I would like to conclude by underlining once again that Russia pays close attention to the rule of law and is prepared to work with all interested parties in ensuring commitment to it at the international and national levels. Thank you, sir.
I thank the distinguished representative of Federal Russian Federation